Hello and welcome to episode 39 of the Boot Nerds podcast. My name is whatever it says on screen, and I'm here with Jay. What's going on?
What's good, my friend? I'm just happy to hear that the sound is back, man. You sound great.
Sound is excellent.
I can tell your voice. Today is going to be a very good episode. We have something for all the speedheads out there. I'm excited. I hope you're excited as well, both you, Josh, and all the beautiful people out there. But before we get started, don't forget to leave all your questions in the comment section right down below. And if you enjoy what we do, what you're seeing and hearing, well, you should totally slap the thumbs up button to share the love and make sure that the Boot Nerds podcast pops up all over the tube. And finally, if you'd like to just listen to this, there are going to be links in the description to the audio-only version, which you can also find on bootnerds.com. But Josh, without further ado, I think it's time we get into today's topic, which is the final verdict. Which is the best speed boot out of the Mercurial Vapor 13 and the X19.1? We've had all the questions. You guys have been talking about it. We have been talking about it. But today we're going to go over it to see which is the better football boot. What would you say? How would you say we should approach it? Have a couple of different parameters we discuss it on?
I think we have to break it down category by category. So what I'm thinking is price, fit/comfort, feel, which implies touch on the ball, overall responsiveness, which talks about the structure of the upper, the sole plate, as well as the stud pattern. And then I think from there, we can also talk about weight and then probably just give our final verdict on that. But before we do that, I want you guys to share your opinions on what you think is the better speed boot. The Vapor 13, the X19.1, you can even include the X19 Plus and Superfly 7 if you happen to prefer one of those two boots. But between Nike and Adidas, who do you think and why makes the best speed boot at the moment? We're very curious to hear your opinions because I think it's fair to say that these are the two most popular football boots, not only on the market amongst consumers, but also amongst professional players as well.
Absolutely. And you know, we can really see how I think the most worn Nike boot would be the Mercurial by far. And also you can say the same for Adidas, that the 19.1 is really just the one boot we see almost every type of player wearing out there. And that might lead us into the first, well, not exactly that first category, but that would be price. Because there is a little bit of a difference, but it's not too bad. Currently, the X19.1 at Unisport, at least, which is a brilliant way to gauge the general price level, shameless plug, is €220, so would roughly be the same amount in dollars, right?
$225, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas the Vapor 13 Elite is 270 euros in the new Dream Speed colorway. So a little bit more expensive than normally. They used to be at 250, 260 euros. So the Vapor is a little bit more expensive. But does it really matter in this discussion, do you feel?
I don't think that if you're trying to decide between these two boots, that price should be the determining factor. I mean, value for money is something you can talk about, but if you're spending 200 plus euros on a pair of football boots, let's be honest, you're not really getting too much in the way of value. But what I will say is that if you value technology and innovation and something that you can't really get from any other football boot, there's more of a unique aspect to the Mercurial in terms of what you're getting for your money versus the X that I don't want to say is a more generic football boot, but there's really nothing that has been incorporated on that we haven't seen before on other products.
And the funny thing is that they're both kind of facelifts, and they're both very good facelifts, but it's true that the Mercurial does have a bigger chunk of new innovation inside of it compared to the X. Also, in terms of what we've seen previously on the market with the Mercurial introducing this high tenacity yarn in the Flyknit structure that makes a very big difference. Whereas the X was basically a nice to have update of the 18.1. It's a very good update, but I agree. And if we're talking value for money, I mean, yes, the X would. I mean, to some people who won't have in just enough money for the Vapor, it's a very, very good value for money boot. But looking at speed boots out there, you can get some boots that are perhaps even more value for money, like Vapor 13 Pro or the Made in Indonesia Morelli Neo 2s or the Puma 1 5.11111 at 200 euros. So it's good, but it's not necessarily the best value for money boots we have here in terms of, speed boots.
Yeah, I mean, the X is cheaper. If that adds value to you, then I think you'll be happy with the X. But in general, I think that should not be the factor that makes you choose between these two, which leads us into what is a very important factor, and that is the fit and overall comfort of a pair of football boots. This is the thing that you're going to be feeling the entire time when wearing these boots. This is the thing that is potentially going to be the reason why you get blisters and can't play for 2 weeks. So it's very, very important that you have a boot that fits you properly and is comfortable. And in that category, while they're both speed boots, I don't think they could be more different from each other.
And that's actually true because, they have obviously different upper materials, which affects the whole fit a lot, but also the general shape of the boot, the last that the brands have used to make the shape of the upper on these boots, they're very, very different because, like we normally talk about with the Vapor 13, it's very, very tight fitting. It's very slim. It's really sleek and feels completely almost like vacuum sucked around your foot.
That's a really good point because that's basically Adidas took a foot and then they wrapped an upper around it and like, okay, let's use that. And then Nike took a foot and they wrapped an upper around it and they're like, squeeze it.
Yeah.
They started squeezing it and they're squeeze it harder.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
That's exactly what happened. True story, by the way. But it is just more tight fitting. It is more, I would say, streamlined and sleek. And if this was a car, this would be one of the concept cars that have been, optimized in every little square meter to be more aerodynamic. And it really feels like Nike have obsessed over every little, basically centimeter where they could make it a little tighter to your foot, because it is basically like a thin ankle sock in terms of the fit. Whereas the X it does have more volume, right?
Yeah, it's much more, I don't want to say sloppy, but it's more forgiving in terms of how it fits, right? They're much more generous in terms of the amount of width and the amount of volume left in the boot. Where I think that if you had 100 people try it on blindly, granted, you'd probably have people saying that the X is more comfortable than the Mercurial. Because like I said, the Mercurial kind of just squeezes your foot and it leaves no extra space on the inside, which means a lot when it comes to the overall touch on the ball and the responsiveness and the experience of how that football boot feels. But if we're talking about pure comfort, I just think that the slightly more forgiving, less squeezing your foot until you can't feel your feet anymore type fit of the X, it is just more comfortable. But you're right in saying that the Mercurial feels very engineered. Like it feels like they thought of everything and there's a reason for everything on the boot, where you have the X that has that kind of extension piece at the top part of the tongue that kind of bunches up when you tie it. Doesn't affect the fit, doesn't affect the comfort, but why? Like you can see the pros that are wearing them have a custom variation without that little extension piece. Why is it there in the retail model, right? So it's ultimately personal preference.
But I think you're also being a little, hard on the Mercurial because, I mean, yeah, it is a tight-fitting boot, but I don't really get the sensation that it's being overly restrictive. You do definitely feel the boot more around your foot, and you're being made aware that the boot is there, but I don't think it's uncomfortable. In fact, once the Flyknit softens up, it is a very comfortable boot to me, at least, because it doesn't give me blisters. I don't get any uncomfortable pressure points, and it doesn't, I would say bunch up or crinkle up anywhere when I bend my foot. But with that said, I agree with everything you said about the X19.1, that it is probably a more generally, maybe more classically comfortable boot in that sense, that it has more of those, it's slightly more plush and padded and feels a bit more stable, and the volume is, well, there's simply more width and volume in it. So it's not as tight around your foot. It's a bit more like, it's not like a slipper, but it's more forgiving, as you say. Brilliant word to use, by the way.
Yeah, no, Adidas they went out and made the everyman's speed boot, which I think is part of the reason why it's so popular. And Nike went and they're like, let's make this very focused, super tight fitting. They made a boot for the fans of the Mercurial line. It's not for people with wide feet. It's not for people that don't like a really tight fit, but there's a reason why the Mercurial line has been and probably still is the most popular line of football boots on the market. So while they made a boot that isn't going to fit everybody comfortably, the people that it does fit absolutely love the way that it fits, versus the X it's for somebody that wants that tight speed boot feel, but also doesn't necessarily want their feet squeezed. And I think you brought up blisters a little bit, and I think that if we're talking about from a comfort perspective, a lot of people gauge what makes a boot comfortable by whether or not it gives them blisters. And I think out of these two boots, while I haven't had blister issues with either of them, I feel a lot less likely to get a blister based on how it fits and feels on my feet from the X versus the Mercurial.
I would tend to agree with you. I'm not afraid to get blisters in either of them, but the X really has, it's got this, basically the padding on the inside of the heel that's so soft and really wraps that top part of the heel where it becomes thinner. I think it's actually the Achilles, it's called. So there you go. It really wraps the Achilles very nicely and gives it support, but in a completely non-restricting, no pressure point kind of way. And I appreciate that a lot. It gives it that comfortable, but also secure feel that you want from a speed boot. But yeah, I mean, I don't think if you get a blister in this, you're super, super unlucky.
Okay, so from a fit and comfort standpoint, what's the winner for you?
I mean, comfort, probably the X, but from a fit perspective, I like the Mercurials more because this gives me what I'm looking for in a speed boot. This is a speed boot, and it's not really trying to be anything else. It's a hardcore speed boot, and it stands by it, where I feel that the X, while it is nice and sculpted, and it's a little bit, stuck in the middle, like it's not really sure what it wants to be. It wants to be a speed boot, but it also wants to appeal to perhaps a slightly larger mass of people.
I agree with you. I think that the X is more comfortable, but the focus of the Mercurial, given what the concept of a speed boot is something that I really appreciate. So while it's not for everybody, if you're after a pure speed boot, the Vapor does it better when it comes to fit, but the X is more comfortable. So again, it depends on what you want, but I guess if we're picking a winner in this category, it has to be the Mercurial just based on how that nothing fits and feels like a Mercurial.
Exactly. And that's maybe the best way of putting it, that the X could be, I could probably find a couple other boots that kind of feels like the X because they're also, generally comfortable and have a speed boot-like fit. But this is just truly unique. There's no other boot out there like the Mercurial. But it's very personal. I would say when it comes to fit, both are very, very impressive. And you can also see by the amount of pros wearing it. I mean, they are generally solid.
Which brings us into touch.
Ooh.
Speed boots, historically known for providing what is supposed to be a barefoot feel. And I think both of these do provide that to a certain extent. However, I've been thinking about this a lot, and we, in our Boot Nerds Boot Awards podcast episode, where we praised the Mercurial Vapor 13 for a good 3/4 of the episode.
Got a bit of stick for it. Vapor 13, Morelli Neo 2 betas. It's fair though. They're brilliant boots, but yeah, okay, point taken.
They're really, really good boots. We had to talk about them. And I think we both agree that the Vapor 13 is a difficult boot to criticize. But what I've been thinking about is when it comes to touch, while I think the touch is very, very good, if I'm after that pure barefoot feel, I feel like there have been Mercurials in the past that have maybe done it a little bit better than what the Vapor 13 has. I'm personally a big fan of the Vapor 8, that comes to mind, and I really like the Tahitian synthetic upper on the Vapor 10. I know you have some favorites of your own.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree when you say that it doesn't feel like the sharpest and the thinnest in the touch department, that the Vapor 8s, and for me especially the Vapor 11, was probably better because it was just so ridiculously thin, that upper package. But I like the balance that Nike have given the 13. Yes, there might be a little bit more material. I think still it's not razor sharp, but it's very close to being super, super sharp and as sharp as you can get. But you know, you do compromise a little bit on the sharpness by getting the added texture. And I think the texture is something I personally enjoy a lot because it's kind of matte to the touch. So it doesn't feel overly sticky, but you still get that a little bit of confidence when you're on the ball, that you do have a little bit of extra grip, and that's something for me in the touch department that's very, very important when I dribble, when I get the ball, and I have it in these very small areas where I need to trust my boots and focus on simply getting out of sticky situations.
Yeah. Sticky situations while talking about a sticky upper. I like it. No, but I think what they've done with the current Mercurial is great. And what the knitted upper does better than a synthetic upper is it just moves better with your foot. It feels really smooth as far as like transition is concerned. But I think when you compare it to the X, it's a mesh-based upper. It's far more simple. It certainly has a softer, more plush sensation to it. And maybe to the touch, it feels a little bit thicker because of the padding that it has. But when you actually make contact with the ball, it ultimately feels very, very thin. But again, I don't want to say feels unextraordinary, but it's kind of exactly what you expect and nothing more.
Yeah. And that's what's so good about it, because it doesn't give you any surprises. It's very thin. It has that good again, I'm talking about balance here, but it doesn't hurt when you strike the ball hard. It doesn't give you that sting when you shoot, but it's still close enough for you to basically feel that everything you do, you're in control. And that's a very, very nice sensation. I'm not into the whole Evo Speed SL OG 99 gram like super paper thin upper, because for me that's simply just too thin. I don't appreciate that. And also it allows Adi to give you a little bit of texture on the upper as well, which for me is what a good touch has to be. It has to be a balance between not feeling clumsy and bulky and giving you a good amount of texture.
Yeah, I think they're both similar to each other in terms of overall thickness. The Mercurial trends more towards raw because there's no real padding to it. It doesn't have a soft element, where the X is similar in thickness but has more of a plushness, a little bit of a sponginess to it.
Exactly.
And you have the X19 which is probably the upper that should be on the X19.1. But Adidas has this thing where they want to design everything as a laceless boot, and then, let's throw some laces on after the fact, and hopefully everyone's going to be fine with that.
I actually think from a fit and touch perspective that I like the 19.1s more than I like the 19 pluses. Okay, I think the material on the 19.1 feels a little cheaper and more plasticky than on the 19 plus. But I think because it has that softer liner, that's actually a mesh synthetic, well, not mesh synthetic, mesh textile. It's almost like a membrane textile that really feels soft, like it compresses. It gives you a little bit more of a soft dampening sensation compared to the X19 Plus. That for me is the sharpest out of the bunch. So I actually like this upper more, as weird as it sounds.
Really? Yeah. Well, because I think the X19 Plus upper is more kind of like, we say old school speed boot, but basically anything before 2014, right?
You're right.
Which is not that long ago, to be fair. And even during those days, like Vapor 11 and Vapor 10 didn't happen that long ago, but it seems like forever given how many boots have come out now. But yeah, like X19 Plus in terms of like inline models, it's really the only thing that's going to offer that kind of synthetic, raw, pingy, barefoot sensation that speed boots were kind of built on. And I think you have an example of another pair of boots from the Adi brand, the X99.1. That
we can talk about that later, because
we will talk about it later.
I think it's something that requires its kind of own category, because we'll get to that later.
Okay, cool. So from a touch perspective, do you prefer Merc or do you prefer X?
I definitely prefer Merc because, as you say, it's more raw. It's more, again, it's probably more dedicated speed boot, whereas the X is a bit more rounded to me. It's a bit more, leaning towards the more generic. It's still a very speed boot-like touch, but the Merc is just so raw. It's thin. It has a very good amount of grip. So that's the winner for me. You?
You know what? If you asked 13-year-old me, I would have said Mercurial 100%.
Right.
But as 26-year-old me, I just like having that little bit of softness and that little bit of padding in the touch, which is why I prefer the X.
And again, this just goes to show that there is a tendency here that the X maybe just leans a little bit towards the middle, so to speak. It appeals to a slightly more general audience than the Merc, which is just a bit more hardcore, boom, boom, shake the room, speed, dribble.
Oh, I like that saying. That was a good saying. Which brings us into a category where there is some separation between these two boots, and that is overall responsiveness.
Because what you don't want in a speed boot is boom, boom, shake the foot inside of you. That was terrible. You don't want movement inside of your boot. You want to feel as if the boot is following your every little move, right? And this is where I feel there's really no discussion, because where the X it's decent when it comes to lockdown, and I think it does a good job of being responsive, in particular also because of this really, really snappy outsole. There's a super strong snapback, as you can see when you bend your foot. But, I mean, there's no comparison to the Mercurial, because it's just, it's just, I thought long and hard about it, and I think this has to be the most responsive football boot I've ever tried in my life.
It is a very impressive achievement, especially given what we've already talked about in terms of comfort. Because what I immediately thought when I wore the Vapor 13 is what drew me to speed boots, and specifically the Mercurial line as a child in the days of the Vapor 3 and the Vapor 4, which were horribly uncomfortable speed boots by today's standards. I could live with the discomfort based on the fact that I loved so much that responsiveness, that super tight, almost like the boot is squeezing my foot, and the second that my foot moves is the second that the boot reacts. And then every time I would go into the pair of Predators that I had as a backup pair at the time, while it was infinitely more comfortable on my feet, I could feel the slop, and I could feel the extra weight, and I could feel that little bit of movement of the boot on my foot that you just don't have with a pair of Mercurials. And what's great about the Vapor 13 Elite is we get the pinnacle of tightness and responsiveness that the Mercurial series is known for, but also comfort that it was never known for, all in one package. And it is a technical marvel in terms of what they've done with that upper. The high tenacity yarn does exactly what it's supposed to do. The anatomic sole plate, I think, is something that Nike should roll out onto other lines as well, because I really like that.
It's amazing.
The new AeroTrack piece in the forefoot doesn't look that different from the Vapor 12, but it feels a lot better in terms of how it bends.
Look at that
and
snap,
then that stud
my man.
pattern. Oh, it's incredible. It's incredible. You could launch. All I think about is just whenever you do that, I want to put something on the sole plate and then just see how far it goes. We should do that
launch
as
a rocket
test.
to the moon.
Oh my gosh, that would be an amazing test. We get all the boots and we take a peanut or something, and we see how far we can launch the peanut. And if there's a difference in response, we measure responsiveness based on peanut flicking.
I guess that's how they do it in the Nike Innovation Kitchen. I mean,
that's what I heard.
Yeah, that's the official Ronaldo peanut flicking test.
These are industry secrets you will not learn about on any other podcast.
But on a real though, I agree with everything you said. This boot is not supposed to be both as comfortable and as responsive as it is. And this is why I'm so surprised. And I don't think I've ever tried anything like this, because it is the most responsive thing out there. It's the most aggressive because, the outsole is so stiff in the midfoot. It really just snaps back whenever you bend your foot. If you're turning, if you're accelerating away, you feel it reacting instantly. And that feels very nice, but also because the boot is so closely wrapped around your foot. And you have the high tenacity yarns that basically just, whenever your foot starts moving inside the boot, they just close up and say, nope, you're not moving. You're just staying right in place no matter what you do. It's just basically the internal foot motion police. It's a term I just came up with. But it keeps your foot in place without ever feeling restrictive, and that's the beauty. And when you then get these like monster shark teeth that just dig into the ground, and they have such a big surface, because not only are they chevron shaped, so you have a relatively big flat surface, but they're also really long, so you have this big flat surface that you can just transfer a lot of energy to the ground with. It feels so powerful compared to the X. It's not a bad boot when it comes to responsiveness. It's just like, it's a fast road car, but this is just the Formula One car of football boots. It's just not a fair comparison.
Yeah, it really is. It's the best, not just in comparison to the X, but in comparison to everything. And it's quite a ways off the second place. What would be the second most responsive boot out there right now? That's a tough question. I don't even know that I know the answer to this. And I almost lean towards Phantom Venom.
I was gonna say Phantom Venom as well, yeah, because you have a really good outsole. It's also very aggressive. You have a decent amount of lockdown thanks to the whole Brio cable system in the upper as well. I like it. Future is also good, but to me, because of the width, it feels a little bit sloppy. So Phantom Venom, probably.
Yeah, Phantom Venom. Yeah. But X is still responsive. It's just not nearly as responsive as
I also
Merc.
like the Nemesis in that department, to be honest.
Oh yeah, the Nemesis 19.1 is pretty solid as well.
But yeah, again, the X isn't bad. It's not the Premier League when it comes to responsiveness. That's kind of the price you pay for comfort, right?
Yeah. So clear winner here is the Mercurial. Adidas, if you're watching, you need to start flicking some more peanuts to catch up. Which brings us into our next category, and that is weight, where there isn't a lot that separates these two boots. They're very similar in weight. I think that technically the Vapor is 20 grams lighter than the X, if that. I'm not sure exactly. But on feet, I think there is a noticeable weight difference between them based on, again, how tight and how connected the Mercurial feels on your feet. The physical weight difference isn't significant, but I think the Vapor feels lighter because of the way that it fits.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's like 11 grams. And I don't honestly think it matters, but I think the weight ties into, when people traditionally have been talking about weight and how light it feels, they also maybe mean how responsive it feels, because the less it weighs, the lighter you are on your toes, and the faster you should be able to react to things, right? So I think it definitely is a massive factor how close the boot feels and how responsive it feels, and so maybe the Vapor feels lighter compared to the X than it actually is, but I don't think. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. They both feel light and responsive enough for it to be a tie, I would say.
Yeah, I would say it's a tie in that category, which brings us to basically the final verdict. Oh, we're going to talk about that too?
No, because enter X19.1. I know this is not an inline boot, and it might be a little bit unfair to bring it back, but we talked about something when we discussed the responsiveness, and that was that, the boot doesn't really sit as tight around the foot as it maybe could in the X. And for me, I have a little bit of a problem with this asymmetrical lacing, because while it does give you a very tight fit going that way, a little bit like we saw on the CTR 360 Maestries, it does leave a little bit to be desired on the outside of the boot. I simply don't feel that there's it's not tight enough, and it's not stable and secure enough on the outside of my foot. So when my foot starts moving that way, I change direction. There's not enough lacing system there to hold the upper in place and keep it strong and tight, keep tension there to really effectively stop my foot from moving ever so slightly more than in the Mercurial. And this is where this comes in to fix it because it has a straight lacing system that I feel does a little bit better. But there's more.
There's more.
There is more. Because the upper here, I thought you were going to take over. Because the upper here is actually also, it's different, right? So it's thinner, and I would argue this is probably the thinnest that we have seen so far on an X boot, because it's simply just a very, very thin layer of mesh, and then there's there's not even mesh. It's basically just these little, like, it's a suede skeleton with this silicone coating on top, and that's it. So it does leave a lot to be decided in the lockdown department, while the central lacing is better, but I think this is the better speed boot compared to the X19 Plus and 19.1. It just feels more traditional, like a Natty Zero.
I'm with you. I'm not. I'd be curious to come back to that opinion after a couple months, because it's still kind of like fresh in both of our minds, and I do appreciate the kind of more traditional speed boot vibes that boot has with, I mean, let's face it, it's a more plasticky upper, right? Which is kind of what speed boots were built on, and they've gone away from that since 2014. So yeah, in terms of giving you that sensation of, okay, I put these boots on my feet, and if someone steps on me, I'm going to the hospital. It does that better than both the Mercurial as well as the X19.1. But that's what a lot of people love about speed boots. It's a more raw, it's a more pingy, it's a more true barefoot feel on the ball when dribbling as well as when shooting, which is good. I really like that. And it feels like a football boot that Adidas actually designed as a laced boot first, which is kind of what I feel like they're lacking across the brand right now. Because you mentioned the lacing system on the 19.1. And I think part of the reason why it's like that is because they wanted to mimic the design of the laceless model, where the X was designed as a 19 plus first. And then they're like, okay, how can we maintain the same silhouette and the same basic design to the upper, but then add a lacing system on there? That lacing system makes absolutely no sense for a speed boot. Why would you not want tightness and lockdown through the forefoot? It's just completely missing. What I've kind of thought of, even with the X18.1, because the 19.1 is the same thing, is if you remember the very first, the 2010 F50 Adi Zero, it kind of had the lacing system off to the lateral side. And right across the top of the forefoot, where you had the F50 logo, there's always that, not so much the leather one, but definitely the synthetic one. There was always that little bit of like free floating space where you could like push down on the upper, and it just didn't wrap your foot close enough. It's partially because they just moved the lacing system to the lateral side. Down the middle, straight up and down, like the Mercurial has always done, like Mizuno's does with the Morelia Neo 2, like the X99.1 has. It's the best way of doing a speed boot when you're talking about quality of fit, quality of lockdown, overall responsiveness, and just having as little space inside the boot as possible.
Exactly. And this is why, for me, this is probably a better speed boot in the traditional raw sense than the X19.1. Because it feels more like a speed boot, or the way I perceive a speed boot, it feels more like that. It has more of those qualities. So while the X19.1 is probably, generally speaking, a more widely accessible boot because it is so comfortable, it is so wide and roomy, I think this is the boot I choose from a pure speed boot perspective.
Yeah, I really like this. But I think that opinion is also based a little bit on nostalgia. To a certain extent.
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, I think we were both excited to just see a football boot that has a tongue.
Yeah. And also that means that the tongue starts moving again when you play all over the place, sliding down to the side and all that stuff. But those were the good old days.
Times have changed.
So which is the winner here? I mean, which do you prefer?
I think in terms of just being a focused purpose-built speed boot, it has to be the Mercurial Vapor. It's as we talked about in the Boot Nerd Boot Awards, it's a technical marvel in terms of what Nike was able to achieve in pretty much every single category. It does everything really, really well. In certain categories, it does things so well that no other boot even comes close. So for being as focused as it is, it's the winner. But like we said earlier, I think that the X19.1 is probably like the everyman speed boot. If you had people try them on blindly, they'd probably say, oh, that feels way more comfortable on my feet. But it's just less focused in general, and it certainly has more flaws, I would say, in comparison to the Mercs. With that said, it's very much a personal preference thing. All football boots are. For the whole season, I would wear the X. I like the X more.
You would?
I do. I find it more comfortable. I like the softness. I like them.
I'm a Mercurial kind of guy. I just got to put it out there. I think the Mercurial, as you say, it's more focused, it's more raw. And for me, it is the better speed boot because it feels faster. That's probably the best way of putting it. I like both of them and I would happily wear them for the entire season. But, you know, given the availability, I'd choose Mercurial Vapor 13 every day.
You know what? I was warned before starting this podcast that you were a bit of a Nike fanboy, and now it just, don't you love it? Don't you love it when people call you a fanboy of whatever brand it might be? That's my favorite comment. I love seeing that.
I think that was a low blow, that one.
How dare you say something is good when it's actually good?
Yeah. But I mean, again, these are just our opinions. So you guys should totally also let us know what you think is the best speed boot out there. Because just like us, you are the boot nerds. You are the connoisseurs. And your opinion actually matters to us. We want to hear what you guys think is the best speed options. So let us know in the comment section right down below. And now I just got to go turn off the alarm that just went off in the office. So
wow, you have an alarm going off. Someone break in.
I think everyone has left and turned on the alarm and not realized I'm here. So I'm going to go and turn that off and be right back.
That is excellent. I'm also curious to know, while we're waiting for Jay to come back as he diffuses what is possibly an emergency situation. Let's hope nothing bad is happening over there. But I'm curious, we talked about the X, we talked about the Mercurial, the alarm is getting louder. I don't know if you guys can hear that. It's really funny. But I'm wondering if any of you guys think that a brand outside of Nike and Adidas is actually making the best speed boot out there right now. Because I think that there is a genuine shout, while it's very different from what we just talked about. The Puma 1 5.1 is a legitimately solid option. I think if you're after something with a leather upper, the Morelia Neo 2, the Morelia Neo 2 Beta, even the Puma King Platinum, I think is a really good option in terms of a speed boot that incorporates a leather upper. But ultimately that takes away from kind of what makes a modern speed boot. So it's just something to throw into the conversation, because I'm curious to know what everybody thinks, and what do you think actually makes, like, what do you want in a modern speed boot? Because the industry has definitely trended towards knitted uppers and mesh-based synthetics. Is there still a demand for these kind of Tasian synthetic uppers like we used to see on the old Mercurials and the F50 Addy Zeros back in the day? I don't know. Curious to know.
What are we talking about?
I talked with our viewers about the potential emergency situation that was happening. The alarm. Was there anything concerning happening?
No. Someone just left, and now all the security guards came rushing in, and I just told them that everything is fine. It's just Josh calling me a Nike fanboy, so they should calm down. Everything is good.
Oh, okay.
So people reacted and responded to that immediately. So don't you dare, and I'm totally gonna cut this out of the episode. So Josh, time for some questions though on that complete bombshell over which boot we like more, and you calling me a fanboy, you friendship over. Should we jump straight into them?
Let's do it.
All right, so this one goes out to you, Joey Wang. Do you like the feel of the Phantom Venom Academy or Tiempo Academy better? Now, I'm gonna hold my hands up. I haven't tried the Tiempo Academy, so what do you say?
I think that they're both really solid takedown models. For the price, you can't go wrong with either of them. If you're more of a traditionalist and you like the leather upper thing, go for the Tiempo. You can never go wrong with leather on a takedown model. It's always going to feel better than cheap plastic, which is what you'll find on most takedown models. As far as the Venom Academy is concerned, I think at the $80 price point, I'm not sure what that goes for in euros, probably around 80 euros, something like that.
Yeah, 80 euros, yeah.
You are not going to find a better synthetic upper.
I would agree. It's very good for the money.
It's a Nike skin upper that's obviously the same branding as the very famous Hypervenom Phantom 1. It's not quite the same, which is probably for the better of the product, certainly for the better of the durability of the product. But I would actually say that if you're on the market for a budget speed boot, you would be better off buying the Phantom Venom Academy over the Vapor 13 Academy, just based on the quality of the upper. And the boot fits really well. It's comfortable. It's a little bit tricky to get on, as are a lot of these Phantom Venom takedown models for whatever reason.
And when you say little bit, you mean a lot. Like seriously nigh on impossible until you figure out how to do it.
Yeah, you might break a couple fingers by the time you get them on. But trust me, once they're on, it will be worth it. Both are great options. It just depends on what type of feel you're looking for.
Gun to your head, which one would you choose?
Just based on being more of a leather guy, I'd pick the Tiempos.
Oh, you're such a Nike. Oh, well, they're both Nike. So. Does the Copa 19 Plus feel like a speed boot, or is it too heavy? 2 girls over drinks and go.
It's a half speed boot. It is a boot that clearly has some speed boot influence in regards to how it has been shaped.
Yep.
However, the sole plate and stud pattern is some of the worst on offer from the Adidas brand and not very speed boot-like at all.
I was going to say the exact same thing. So the sleekness of the upper, how it has this almost like straight line from the very low toe box and up to the still relatively low profile midfoot, it feels like it has the sculpted sensation of a speed boot, but just with that more plush leather-like sensation. So in a sense, yes, but also because, as you say, because of the outsole, no, not really. If you slapped on like the X19 Plus plate or the Nemesis plate on the Copa.
Yeah, it would have been really, really good. Okay, you do the Nemesis split sole, you move the stripes back to the outside like they should be in the first place, and then you continue the stripes and you do the Mania split sole stripe thing. How cool would that be? That'd be sick.
I just want the X19 plate on it, and we would be talking business. Anyway, moving on to the next question. Do you think it's even possible now to make an actual new Superfly? One that's groundbreaking technologically enough to separate it from the Vapor? And that's a very good question. Is it possible?
I think that's what Nike should do. And being the boot nerd that I am, I think about this way too much. And I don't see where they really go from here. I think that they could maybe reintroduce carbon fiber. That'd be a cool thing, because that was kind of something that the Superfly was built on. Mm-hmm. I don't see Flywire cables making a comeback. There's not too much more they can do with the cut of the boot in terms of like the collar.
Not right now, at least, no.
And it seems like they're trending towards going lower rather than higher since the Superfly 4, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. To me, it would have to be a material thing. And the dream that everyone has for like the future of football boots is that you have this material that like self-adapts. Like you put it on your foot and it customizes to your foot instantaneously. However, this is technology that is purely imaginary at the moment, as far as I'm aware. And I don't know, Jay.
No,
what do you think?
I think that right now is not possible. We simply don't have technology, even across all other sports out there, as far as I know, at least, that can give us a big enough or significant enough change for the Superfly to really justify making it a Superfly and making it different enough from the Vapor. I think they should do what they did last time. Realize, okay, right now is not the time. We don't have the technology to really make it super unique like it should be. Let it go to sleep for a few years until you have something truly groundbreaking. I should say something with adaptive lockdown or an adaptive fit is something that can really completely mold to your foot. I'm thinking some sort of, high-tech future Uber 3000 latex, spandex, mesh, whatever, some sort of compound that can stretch out. But the second it has kind of found its maximum stretch, i.e. the shape of your foot, it also has a way of tightening up and keeping your foot in place to give you a proper, true sock-like experience. It sounds impossible, and it should be, but this is Nike. This is the Superfly. There are no limits, and that sounded a bit Nike fanboyish. I can hear that. Yeah.
But this is what I think. You look at this just from the side, and you know it's a football boot. You know that it fits on your feet, but it really doesn't look like a foot, right? I think that the next big jump in football boots is going to be a football boot that genuinely looks like your foot. And I think that's where it is going. I'm curious to see what the response is going to be on that type of thing. Because Under Armour has had some running shoes. I don't know if you're familiar with them. I can't even remember what they're called. And Under Armour kind of did that. Remember they did that with the, what was it called? But it had like the little toe indentations.
Yeah.
And it kind of a little bit of an anatomic shape. Speed form.
Yeah.
Right? That to me, when that came out, I was like, wow, that legitimately kind of looks like a logical evolution to the shape of a football.
And they've
boot.
kind of begun that already with the anatomical outsole. Now they need to get the upper
right.
to join in on that. I just hope they make the right foot shape and don't go out and take Jolter's foot or something, because that's going to look absolutely ridiculous.
That's why that idea doesn't work, is because everyone's like, not even so much the shape of your foot, but just like think about the shape of your toes, right? Yeah. Like that's something that varies so much from person to person.
Curve. Like think of how a sock would look like when it's on your foot. Basically take that shape and just have the boot look that way.
Yeah. But I don't see how that's possible. I really don't.
Me neither. And that's why you and I are boot reviewers and connoisseurs and nerds and not engineers who get paid a lot of money to actually develop these kind of things. So yeah, of course, we have developed the ingenious and very innovative peanut flipping method, the test. Nike will take 10% once you start implementing these in your innovation kitchen tests. So thank you very much. Another thank you goes out to you guys. If you made it all the way to the end, you are true boot nerds and you deserve an applause and a virtual bro fist and high five and whatever else we can give you guys out there. Now, if you want even more virtual high fives, you can also go and leave your questions in the comment section right down below. We're going to bring them up in the next episodes, of course, where we're also going to talk about something, well, as always, very, very exciting. Now, before you go, do not also forget to slap a like on the video. We'd really appreciate that. And if you want to see more boot-related stuff, you can either go and subscribe to Josh's channel over there if you haven't done so already. And on top of that, you can go and check out what we do at Unisport by clicking the green bubble somewhere over there on the screen. And finally, if you haven't subscribed to the best boot-related podcast on set interwebs already, you can click the black bubble that says, you guessed it, Boot Nerds in the middle of the screen right over there. And with that said, guys, stay awesome. We'll talk to you guys next week. And with that said, I'm JayMike, and I approve this message. Hadigot.
See you in the next episode.